officers. So if you could do that for us, we'd appreciate it. The deadline is June 11th. June 11th is the deadline. So if you get it on the week, it's a special celebration. We've got the block party and Rex Morgan Awards on the 5th. So get it in and then just come celebrate, food and drink for all. So we really, hope you can do that and hope you can come to Rex Morgan and the block party and bring your friends and colleagues. It's going to be a great celebration. I'm going to turn it over now to Christine, Dana, and Tim for the training. So thank you very much for joining us today. Tim, you want to take it away?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Tim Murphy, Program Officer with SCFD, joined by Dana Manutuane and Christine Fiddler. I'm going to get us started off today with just a review of our Tier 2 page of the website. There are a lot of resources available to you on that page, and it has all the information that you'll need to to complete your annual submission. So starting on the SCFD homepage, just click on grant making and then the already funded tab, and then click on Tier 2. And on this page, again, there's everything that you'll need to complete your submission. Just some general information at the top about Tier 2 organizations and the regional impact requirement and the annual threshold. A little further down, we have a section called workshops and support. And that is guides for navigating flux, your bank confirmation guide, the Tier 2 calendar, a list of assigned program officers if you're not sure who to reach out to. And there's also the agenda for this training, so that'll be posted in advance. And just under that, we have the Tier 2 annual submission documents. So that is the very detailed application directions, the templates for Form A, Form B, and Form C. And please make sure to use the ones that are posted on the website. We do make slight changes to those every now and then, so please use the current ones. And then there's also a list of items that SCFD funds cannot be used for just per the state statute. Right under that in the black box, you have your access to Flux. So just click on that and it'll take you to your Flux login page. So that's all on the website I wanted to highlight. So just going into some general things about the Tier 2 funding, and the Tier 2 funding and how it is distributed is described in the SCFD statute. So all SCFD funded organizations must demonstrate that most of their activities are conducted within the state of Colorado and principally benefit the residents of the district. Tier 2 organizations must also demonstrate a regional service and its impact. And that is defined in Board Resolution 1707, which states that, for purposes of Tier 2 qualification, organizations must show that at least 15% of their total Colorado attendance comes from outside of its home county. If an organization falls below that threshold, we'll apply a 3-year rolling average to determine compliance. So that's one reason why it's really important to accurately track your attendance to ensure continued SCFD funding and to qualify as a Tier 2 organization. Tier 2 funding is based on qualifying annual income, qualifying paid attendance, and documented free attendance. The statute, SCFD board resolutions, and memos provide definitions for those terms and guidance on reporting. So qualifying annual operating income means operating income from all mission-based sources, except for capital construction fund income, designated funds raised for the purchase of specified capital needs, unrelated business income, funds raised for the purpose of debt reduction or an endowment, and any distribution of monies by the board. Qualifying paid attendance means the total paid attendance at all public mission-based programs as verified by annual audit reports. Dana and Christine will go into more details on each of those. So this year's annual submission deadline is Wednesday, June 12th at 4 p.m. And as Deborah mentioned, we highly recommend submitting before the deadline. We will review your application for completeness, and we'll send it back to you and give you an opportunity to submit all the required documents. So this year, to qualify for Tier 2 funding, organizations must have a qualifying annual operating income of $1,899,815.09 in the most recently completed fiscal year. This is up 5.73% from 2023, and the cash difference is $102,649.95. SCFD applies a 2-year trailing consumer price index average to calculate that threshold. Tier 2 funding is calculated using a formula within the statute, which is applied annually. The formula gives a specific weight to an organization's qualifying annual operating income, its qualifying paid attendance, and documented free attendance. Those weights are determined by the SCFD Board of Directors, and currently, annual operating income makes up 50%, annual paid attendance is 48%, and documented free attendance is 2%. And all of your qualifying attendance, whether it's paid or free, must pass the 4-part test, which is described on Forms B and C. So that basically means it's mission-based. For paid attendance, it's something that you would normally charge a fee, or free attendance, it's something that's normally free of charge. You have to have traceable contemporaneous documentation, and the activity or program must be open to the public. When it comes to virtual attendance, SCFD distributed a memo in March of 22 that states that only paid attendance within the state of Colorado will be allowed as part of the funding formula if it meets the 4-part test. Virtual attendance will not be counted towards Form C. So do we have any questions so far on this opening section? Any questions? Let's see. Other slides with detail to share. We don't have slides with the details on what we're going over today. Oh, and somebody already answered your question. Never mind. Well, if there are no other questions on this section, I'm going to pass it over to Dana to talk about Form A, which will cover the qualifying annual income. Dana?
Greetings, everyone. Thanks, Tim, for going over all the wonderful information. Hello. I'm glad you're here with us as we welcome in spring with, I think, clouds and maybe a little wind, or it's going to pick up a little bit later. I'm going to review in detail the qualification matrix, Form A for annual operating income. This may feel similar or familiar to some of you, but not so familiar if this is your first time going through the Tier 2 qualification process. It's been a year since we've done this training, so it's understandable to be a bit rusty, as we are in the office as well, or overwhelmed if this is the first time. So we're here to help. Jessica, could you please show the first auditor report? Be aware that you must provide an independent auditor report verifying Form A. There is a sample of this required form available in the annual submission directions, Addendum B. It must be signed by the auditor to be accepted. And I repeat, it must be signed by the auditor to be accepted. So please check that before your final submission. So let's dive into the details of Form A matrix. Jessica, would you go ahead and display Matrix A for me? While she's pulling up that, it's already up. The Tier 2 qualification matrix, Form A, determines 2 things. 1, if an organization's annual operating income meets the qualifying income threshold, and as Tim said, for 2024 is $1,899,815.09. Number two is the organization's qualifying income. This is an essential piece of the Tier 2 qualifying formula to calculate allocations. The distribution year is indicated in the top left of the form. You must use the correct version of Form A, as Tim said, for the year of submission. So you can always tell if you just look at the top left corner. The Form A template is available on the Tier 2 page of our website, and please be sure to provide your auditor with a copy of the template for the correct year. An explanation of the matrix is as follows. On the top, place your organization name, just like when you were in elementary school and the teacher wanted you to put your name at the top. So please put your organization name where it says organization name. Include the most recent fiscal year date. The upper chart records total unrestricted annual operating income, or the AOI, and the lower chart records the total qualifying income. You will need to rename the column headings to match the revenue categories using your audit. So Jessica, could you quickly pull up the sample financial audit? So if you have several lines on your audit, and Jessica will show you where where the column is. If you have several lines in your audit, you can add one or two more columns on the matrix B if needed. Please ensure that the column headings in the matrix matches your audit revenue categories, so it's easy for us staff to correlate between the matrix and the audit. So as you can see, our sample auditor did a wonderful job of making Form A match the audit. Let's go back to the matrix A, Jessica, please. Use your audit to fill in line 1 with subtotals of your unrestricted income. Rows A through I are revenue figures excluded from qualifying income. Rows L through X are revenue figures included to establish qualifying income. The matrix auto-calculates across the rows and down the columns. For the rows, my lights went out. I hope everybody can still see me. For the rows with an asterisk, your auditor must provide a note or schedule explaining more details about that number or amount. Also include schedules if there are any entries in the net assets release column. If listed on the financial statements, you must do this. Be sure to include details of the original source of the assets, such as, for example, foundation, corporate, or individual, etc. The total unrestricted annual income report on line K and the total qualifying income reported on line Y should be equal. The total amount must exceed Tier 2 qualifying threshold of $1.899 million. So let's visit the chart, the upper chart,
Did this.
in more detail. I think
What is
someone's,
going on?
can whoever's speaking mute themselves, please? Thank you. The following forms of income must be excluded from the calculation of unrestricted annual operating income. These must either be excluded per the SCFD statute or are exclusions based on accounting industry standards and IRS requirements applicable to 501c3 nonprofit organizations or SCFD policy. Rows A and B, capital construction fund income and designated funds for capital needs. 100% of capital donations must be excluded. Again, 100% of capital donations must be excluded. So if there's a capital income such as designated funds for capital needs or a capital construction campaign, you will enter those amounts into line A and B as whole numbers, so it deducts from the total. Administrative fees cannot be deducted from this source of income and cannot count towards qualifying income. Row C, income for endowment corpus for principal, does not count beyond distribution. In other words, the distribution from the endowments counts, but the corpus does not count. Row D, previous year SCFD income, that one has an asterisk. Exclude total SCFD funds received in the most recent completed fiscal year. One of the things that I want to point out is that you must know which quarters of the SCFD income are reflected in the audit, since we know every organization has different fiscal years. If the audit totals differ from actual SCFD funds distributed, provide reconciliation and explain why there is a difference. For example, or such as accrual accounting, restricted funds, etc. There are a lot of different ways organizations count that money. So for us to be able to reconcile it, please let us know the quarterly distributions that are included in row D. Row E, SCC income, also known as the collaborative of the SCFD. If an organization receives money from the collaborative of the SCFD, it needs to be excluded up to the amount paid on their membership. For example, if the organization paid $5,000 to be a member of the collaborative and they received $4,000 back as part of the programming that was done, all $4,000 would need to be excluded. If they received $6,000 back, the $5,000 would be excluded and the extra $1,000 would count as qualifying income. Row F, unrealized capital gains and losses. Only realized income counts towards qualifying income. So any unrealized capital gain and losses must be excluded. We don't want to penalize or reward organizations for unrealized losses or gains, respectively. So it needs to be backed out and essentially negating it. So if it's an unrealized gain, record the amount in the matrix and it subtracts it. If it's an unrealized loss, you put it in as a negative amount, therefore it adds it back in. So you're not penalized for it. We're basically trying to net zero to get it to zero. In kind, even by related party. In kind needs to be excluded even by related party. In kind is not actual cash. Row H, unrelated business income per 990T of the IRS. This income that is not substantially related to the organization's exempt purpose that is the basis of the organization's exemption. So according to the IRS Revenue Code, this income which is not substantially related to organization's exempt purpose for exclusion from tax under Section 501c3 on which organization must report and pay tax. This income is excluded because the income is not directly associated with the organization's charitable purpose. Row I, optional reconciliation row. Then we have this row, and this is an example in the case where we would use it if you needed to get to a net total of concessions or net total of special event if it's not already taken care of in your totals in your audit. Both of these need to be counted as net total. So use that row if needed. Row J, total exclusions. That is a subtotal line and it will auto-calculate. And row K is your total unrestricted annual income, and that will also auto-calculate. So once your auditor prepares the top half of the matrix with all the totals calculated, note where row K meets column L, and you will see your total unrestricted annual operating income. And yay, it's over 1.899 million. In the bottom portion of the matrix, we are asking for your unrestricted annual operating income. That is to say, your total qualifying income. The following revenue figures are included to establish that qualifying income. Row L, ticket sales, net seats and sales taxes. Ticket sales need to be net if there exists any seat and sales tax, since taxes are passed through the organization and therefore not actual income. For example, Denver has a facilities development admission tax, otherwise known as a seat tax, and the city of Lone Tree collects a 4% admission tax with the exception of city of Lone Tree owned and operated facilities. Another one that I can think of is Boulder has an admission tax as well. So plain and simple, just include the net ticket sales without seat and sales taxes. Row M, memberships. If your organization has a membership fee, please record that revenue. Row N, tuition. This is pretty straightforward. This would cover things like classes and workshops. Row O, concession and sales taxes. Record net. And again, I repeat, record net of expenses. So remember to the cost of goods sold to determine your net amount. We've on occasion had organizations report gross sales, and unfortunately, we've had to adjust those amounts to include just net sales. Row P, rental and residency income. This is a form of passive income. The IRS carves out rental income as not being a UBI, otherwise as an unrelated business income generating activity. So this will need to have a detailed schedule because it does have an asterisk. And for example, if you have low income residencies for visiting artists, or if you have a venue that you rent, put down collected amounts. Row Q, interest income. Interest earned over time is considered income. It should be net of management fees. Row R, individual, pretty straightforward. This is typically in the form of donations. Row S, corporate support, include things like sponsorships, social responsibility dollars, community giving, etc. Row T, charitable foundations. Again, it's pretty straightforward. If you're so fortunate as to get, Bloomberg Philanthropy Grant or Carnegie Mellon Foundation Grant, there are many. Endowment transfers to operations is row U. For example, if you have a quasi-endowment in which the principal and income may be utilized at the discretion of the organization, those can be included here. These funds should only be counted once towards an organizational qualifying income. And be sure that qualifying revenue does not include contributions to an endowment. And we discussed that a little bit earlier about the corpus. Row V is government. This is exclusive of SCFD. So funding from Colorado Creative Industries, local government, and the NEA, those are all great examples for this line item. Row W, special event income. Again, it has an asterisk, so make sure you're using net revenue and you're giving details in those schedules. Row X is any other revenue. If the organization has other income not reported elsewhere, reported here. For example, ATM fees, reimbursements, royalty earnings, any kind of miscellaneous income. These incomes should have a schedule so we can verify and correlate. And just before I finish up, a bit about federal and other COVID relief income that you may have that is just still lingering. Most relief programs are categorized as unrestricted federal grants. They don't necessarily need to be listed individually in a schedule. However, if there were a Paycheck Protection Program, PPP loan, or other loans, these are not counted as income until they are forgiven. And there should be a footnote that it was forgiven. Loans that are not forgiven should be included as liabilities on your balance sheet. If economic industry disaster loan, otherwise known as the EIDL, shows up in the organization's finances, the loan portion should be in the liability section of the balance sheet and not treated as unrestricted income for the purpose of SCFD qualifying income. There are instances where there's an EIDL advance, which are like grants, and these do not need to be repaid. Employee retention tax credit is required to show credit in revenue, and revenue should be recognized when they apply. This is based on reimbursement of payroll taxes. And I don't know if this is still out there, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Shuttered venue operators grants and COVID PPE grants, which may have been subject to a single audit, can be counted as unrestricted income. Although governmental income does not have an asterisk, it would be extremely nice for us, the SCFD staff, for auditors to add a schedule or footnote in the matrix that lists the amounts from those relief programs. So just help us out as much as possible. So that concludes the matrix 8A portion of this. Do we have any questions? And feel free, if you don't want to speak up, you can always use the chat feature as well. We'll monitor that.
I don't see anything in the chat, Dina.
You all are so easy today. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Christine to go over attendance.
Thank you, Dana. I'm Christine Fiddler. I'm the third program officer at SEFD. And as Dana said, I'm going to cover the next topic on today's agenda, which is attendance. So the second and third part of the funding formula that determines the amount of Tier 2 funds is annual qualifying paid attendance, which is Form B, and annual documented free attendance, which is Form C. Let me clarify, Form B is required, Form C is optional. A few reminders, as Tim mentioned before, annual paid attendance accounts for 48% of the Tier 2 funding formula, and annual documented free attendance is optional, but it accounts for 2% of the Tier 2 funding formula. I will pause after I explain each form to allow time for questions, but please make sure to ask questions that would be beneficial for the group. If you have a specific question in relation to your organization, contact any of us program officers directly. Okay. Let's see. Jessica's got the form up. Okay. To ensure consistency, SEFD uses a 4-part test. This test will help you determine if a specific activity will count towards your paid or documented free attendance. So let's take a quick spin through the 4-part test. Number 1, the program or activity must be mission-based and meaningfully engages the organization's patrons in the mission. Number 2, the program or activity must be one for which the organization normally charges a fee to participate. Number 3, a per-person payment to participate in the program or activity was made to the organization as evidenced by traceable, contemporaneous documentation. And finally, number 4, the program or activity must be open to the general public without restriction or limitation by invitation, such as anyone who wishes to purchase a ticket or admission may do so. It is mandatory that your activity or program meets all 4 of these requirements. So by running each of your activities or programs through this 4-part test, you can ensure that attendance can be added into Form B. So scrolling down, as you can see on the screen, Form B is split into categories where you will funnel the numbers of attendance for your activities or programs. Under the first heading, which is paid attendance, we have subscription memberships. This is the section to list people who pay for a series of activities through a membership or subscription. Please note, memberships only count when a patron uses it. For example, a patron attends a museum 7 times, then you would count that patron's attendance 7 times. For subscriptions, you should count the number of tickets sold, and this will be limited by the number of seats at the venue. So for example, a patron buys 2 tickets for a 5-show season, then you would count that patron 10 times. Does that make sense? Under individual general full price admissions, this is where you would count patrons attending an activity once and paying full price. Under individual general reduced price admissions, this is where you count patrons attending an activity once and paying a discounted price. Under qualifying performance exhibits and benefits, this is where you count special exhibits or activities that people attend outside of your regular activities. So for example, special events, traveling, or singular exhibits, or distinctly unique performances. Under paid enrollment for course or class, you should count educational activities that students pay to attend. This, for qualification purposes, organizations can count how many times a person attends a class or course. So for example, a patron attends a 10-week course twice a week, then you would count that patron 20 times. Under qualifying tour group admissions attendance, this would be school groups, scouts, etc. You should count the number of admissions or participants only when a prior written agreement details the upfront payment per individual. So this can include special group admissions such as a school group or tour. Under virtual online attendance, you can only include paid virtual attendance from Colorado residents only. So let me repeat, it must be paid virtual attendance from Colorado residents only. Under qualifying attendance, this is truly a catch-all category. For example, you could put here paid rehearsal performances or one-time collaborations. Under the second heading, non-qualifying attendance, remember from this point on, these numbers do not count towards the funding formula. So that would include non-qualifying tours, which are from schools or others. This would be for an event or activity that did not have a per person fee, or it was a private tour. Private events attendance, this is where you would count events that are not open to the public. This would be an example of a corporate retreat or something that was invitation only, or perhaps a birthday party. And then non-qualifying performance exhibits and benefits. This is where you count activities open to the public, but the specific mission is secondary to the nature of the activity. So this would include all fundraising attendance, except if a fundraiser was a private event, then that would be listed under private event attendance. Other non-qualifying event attendance, this is where you would put other non-qualifying, not accounted for, and any other Form B category. So some examples here would be volunteer recognition events, paid virtual attendance from residents outside of Colorado, etc. As you look at this form, you may have noticed that next to certain categories, there are asterisks. These denote that if you enter a number in that category, we require additional explanation in the presentation of a Form B paid attendance schedule document. You will only need to submit a schedules document if you entered a number in a category with an asterisk. Jessica, if you could pull up the sample Form B paid attendance schedules, please. Perfect. As you can see from this example, we are essentially looking for an explanation as to how these attendance numbers may or may not meet the 4-part test. The example at the top of your screen further explains an attendance count listed for the qualifying tour group category under paid attendance. We would need to know how that number meets all 4 components of the test. This example explains their event meets all tests. So number 1, direct implementation of mission through yada yada. Number 2, program for which fee is normally charged. Number 3, they have contracts showing upfront per person payments. Number 4, it's open to any school during regular hours. So this is just an example. This schedule is especially important to the other category under paid attendance, as this lets us know that what types of activities may fall into this general category. So after you've completed Form B, and if necessary, Form B schedules, you will also need your auditor to complete and sign an agreed upon procedures letter. An example of what this letter should look like is located at the end of the Tier 2 submission directions PDF on our website. So feel free to reference that example if your auditor asks for support. Finally, when you have all items, and again, that is Form B schedules, if you have additional information to share about categories with asterisks, and your auditor's signed agreed upon procedures letter, you will need to combine all of these items into a single PDF, then upload it directly into the online qualification application in Flex. Okay, so I will pause for a moment for questions about Form B paid attendance, but I do want to remind everyone to please only ask the questions that are beneficial for the group. If you have specific questions about your organization, reach out to program officers.
And Christine, we do have a couple questions in the chat. Hallie would like to know if the organization has a minimum fee for paid tours up to 6 people. Does that count given the restrictions of part 3 of the 4-part test? So that per person fee with a contemporaneous traceable documentation. So I think the question would be is is there a set like ticket for 6 people to do this tour? And if there is, I think you could easily say if it's, $60, it's $10 per person. If it's like a sliding scale, I mean, we just need to know how that fee is being tracked. And if it is tracked, or if you just admit 6 people. So that would be my question about that.
Hmm.
Dana or Christine?
Yeah, Tim, thank you for that. I think there are a few organizations that have, they have an admission, a special admission for EBT card holders that still would meet that 4-part test. So if that is kind of where you're going with that, as long as there is a fee, and as long as it fits that 4-part test, it can count. So if there's any specificity to it, please reach out to us ahead and we can talk through that.
Yeah,
Also,
go ahead.
sorry, this is Jessica Cato here. Also to keep in mind, I kind of to Ally and Lisa's next question. Yes, we do accept, especially for like school groups and those types of things. We understand that you may say, oh, this field trip is $400, but when you're working with the school, you need to have the documentation that we are charging $400 for 350 students to come to our facility. So there still needs to be a link back between the fee and how many people. So that has always been the rule. We understand with especially like school groups and group rates, it's kind of both questions that that fee may vary depending on what the group rate is, or the school that you may be working with, or the Girl Scouts or things of that nature. But when you are booking the event, or you're working with the school or group, the documentation still needs to say this is the amount for this many people. That will suffice the per person payment requirement.
So Jessica, just to kind of clarify, if the documentation that an organization has and it says they're getting paid $400 for 350 students and 400 students show up, they can only count the 350 students that's on the contracted amount they are to receive?
I think, I mean, you have to, you still want to have accurate numbers, right? So I guess that gets into a little bit of a dicey area. I'll have to think about that, Dana. But I think you really want to try to make sure that, to the best of your ability, that you are having documentation that ties what is being paid to the organization back to the amount of people participating. That's what the statute requires. And so because Tier 2's funding is completely formulaic, that's why there's so many rules and regulations around it, to make sure that everybody's numbers are as accurate as possible, so the funding goes out as accurately as possible. And if there's additional questions on how to track something, or how your organization is doing something, I would suggest reaching out to one of the program officers.
Hey, any additional questions? Form B, paid attendance.
Christine, I'm going to ask one. This is Madeline with CMC. Hi.
Hi.
I see this schedule and it looks very tidy. I'm curious. I think we've had in the past a bigger, hairier spreadsheet version. So I'm curious, is this preferred? Is there one way to do it? Or do you get all kinds from different folks, and as long as it's readable, it works?
Uh,
What's the
So, yes, this is the preference. However, we do receive all types. I'll let Dana and Tim chime in as well, but
I snapped a picture, so maybe the preference can become our method.
What I've noticed is that certain auditors do it in a certain way, and so this one I see, but I also see where they're not necessarily in a chart format, and they're just the schedule and what they're explaining and how it fits the 4-part test. So as long as we're able to understand it, I think it should be fine. We don't want to put any excessive restraints or more burden on organizations to get it done. But typically the auditor, what they put out, and we've seen pretty much all of them, it's fairly okay. Otherwise we would get back to organizations and say, this needs to be redone. So we're good.
Great, thank you.
hey, any other questions? No? Okay, we'll continue on to Form C, which is free attendance. Jessica, okay, you're on it. Thank you. 2 important reminders. Form C is optional. You do not have to submit Form C if it does not apply to your organization. However, it is 2% for the funding formula. So if you have it, we recommend filling it out. This is completed by you, the organization, and you will assure the accuracy of the form, not your auditor. And so for organizations that do offer free activities and want to submit this form, you can see there's also another 4-part test, just like Form B. However, question number 2 refers to free programs or activities instead of paid. When you run your programs and activities through this 4-part test, this will help you make sure that the number of people attending that activity can be reported or not, okay? So Form C, again, is split into categories. It looks just like Form B, but this is applicable only to free. Under the first heading, qualifying documented free attendance, we have, again, subscription membership attendance. This is where you will count the number of subscriptions that are given free of charge, or you count members attendance each time a member makes a visit free of charge. So for example, they received a free year membership through some sort of promotion or a silent auction or something like that. Individual general free admission. This is where you would count the number of free of charge admissions from primary programming. Qualifying performance, exhibits, and benefits. This is where you count the number of free mission-based admissions for special programming outside permanent ongoing programming. So for example, special events, traveling, or singular exhibits. Free enrollment for courses or classes. This is where you should count attendance for each class, workshop within a series that was free of charge. For example, a patron attends a 10-week course twice a week, then you would count that patron 20 times. Qualifying tour group admission attendance. This is where you count free school assemblies or tours of your site. Free outreach programs. This is where you should count unpaid outreach activities or events. And then other qualifying free attendance. Again, this is the catch-all category. For example, you would put free rehearsal performances here. Under the second heading, non-qualifying documented free attendance, remember from this point on, numbers do not count towards the funding formula. But the first one, non-mission related attendance, this is where you should count the number of people attending non-mission related events that are free, performances or activities. Again, that's like fundraising. Untrackable attendance. Under this category, you should include the count of people from events, activities, performances, etc., that are not verifiable. And this would, for example, be police counts or aerial drone footage. And remember, please do not use estimates. Other non-qualifying free attendance. This is a catch-all, for example, volunteer recognition activities. And this is where you would put free virtual attendance. because as a gentle reminder, free virtual attendance does not qualify for the funding formula. So just like Form B, if you have entered numbers in any of the categories with an asterisk, you will need to include additional information in the form of a schedules. Thank you, Jessica. As you can see on this example, we are essentially looking for explanation as to how these attendance numbers may or may not meet the 4-part test. So this is just like the schedule for Form B. These schedules are especially important, again, in the other category under qualifying free attendance, as this lets us know what types of activities may fall into this general category. And after you've completed Form C, and if necessary, Form C schedules, you will also need to complete and sign an applying agreed upon procedures letter. This is done by someone in leadership from your organization, not your auditor. An example of what this letter looks like is located at the end of the Tier 2 submission directions PDF on the website. And finally, when you have completed all items, which again is Form C schedules, if you need to provide additional information with categories with asterisks, and your signed applying agreed upon procedures letter. You will need to combine all these items into one single PDF, then upload it directly into the online qualification application in Flux. So a quick reminder, an aside, if you are collaborating with another Tier 2, there should be an agreement between both organizations of who will count the attendance, even if it's 50-50, it just needs to be an agreement. You don't need to provide this at the time of submission, but SCFD may ask for this if we have questions during our review. So I'll go ahead and pause here for questions about Form C, free attendance. But again, please focus on questions that are beneficial to the group. If you have questions specific to your organization, just reach out to one of us.
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay.
Give it just a second, but doesn't look like we have any questions. So thank
Okay.
you, Christine. And I'm just gonna move on to just go over some things in the qualification and certification sections of the annual submission. Jessica, if you could share the tester application. Give us just a second. Do we have that up yet? Here we go. All right, so we have just a test application that we use for these types of presentations. So we'll have Jessica just start one of those.
Just as a quick reminder to everyone, when you first log into the system, you will need to click the apply for Tier 2 funding button to start your certification annual submission for this year. And then once you start it, it will appear over on the left-hand navigation under drafts.
And just quickly, we do have one more question about attendance, and it's a good one. So as someone new to the process, why do we report non-qualifying attendance information? And that is so we are able to show the full impact our organizations have in the district. We use all of the attendance data for the Colorado business community for the arts biannual study of our funded organizations. So even though the attendance won't count towards the funding formula, we still like to see the full picture of what your organization is doing. So I hope that answers that. Alrighty, well, we'll move along with the qualification and certification sections of the annual submission. And just a few things to go over. In the qualification section, there are 4 required attachments. These are your audited financial statements from the most recently completed fiscal year. Also your most recently filed Form 990. And then we also require Form A and Form B, including the auditor's letter and supporting schedules. And as Christine said, those documents should be uploaded. So Form A, the auditor letter and supporting schedules should be uploaded as one document, and the same for Form B. There is also the optional attachment Form C. And again, this should be uploaded as one document with the organization's agreed upon procedures letter and supporting schedules. That's pretty much all I have for the qualification section. But moving on to the certification section, we do have.
Hey, Tim,
Yeah, sorry.
sorry.
Am I going too fast?
Yeah, somehow the system pulled up a tier 3 application, so
Oh, sorry.
I probably just confused the heck out of everybody.
Yep,
So
sorry about
if
that.
you just want to kind of run back through that again, I think that would be helpful.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks.
No problem. Yep, so in the qualification section, we do have required documents. So, there are 4. It's your audited financial statements from your most recently completed fiscal year and the most recently filed Form 990. And then we require Form A, including the auditor's letter and supporting schedules, and Form B with the same auditor's letter and supporting schedules. And both Form A and Form B, those should be uploaded as one group of documents. So Form A, the auditor letter and supporting schedules as one document, and Form B, auditor's letter and supporting schedules as another document. There's the optional attachment, which is Form C. And again, that should be uploaded as one document with the organization's agreed upon procedures letter and those supporting schedules if necessary. So moving on to the certification section, we have a few new questions this year, and there's just some other areas that I would like to highlight as well. The new questions this year relate to your organization's EDIA efforts. So if we can get down to that section. So those new questions this year, there are 3 in total. The first one is describe how the organization is investing in the following areas and describe the impact. So the first area is leveraging SCFD funds to support a diverse and growing array of audiences, creating an environment where all are welcomed and included, and increasing the capability to understand inequities and barriers to accessing arts, culture, and sciences while actively working to remove them. The second new question just under that is to provide examples of how the organization has implemented EDIA practices to increase representation of its board, staff, contractors, volunteers, and patrons to better serve all of the residents of this diverse district. The third new question is just underneath the income and expenses section. And that question is, what percentage of the most recently completed fiscal year operating budget did the organization use towards advancing EDIA? So we're looking for the percentage of your budget that was spent on specific activities. So this would include EDIA trainings for staff and board, specific outreach to different communities around the district, maybe developing an equity statement or working with consultants to improve your hiring practices, those types of things. And we do realize not everyone is specifically tracking this information, down to the dollar, but it is something we would like to see you all start to track if you haven't, just so we can get a better sense of what our organizations are doing in this area. Let's see. The next thing is just the attendance section in the certification section of the application. Yep, I'll wait for you to scroll down. Yeah, so in the attendance section, we have simplified this. We did this last year. So we are only looking for paid, and I think it's paid and reduced or paid and free. Sorry. Yeah, so we're trying to simplify that a little bit for you. Jessica, if you can scroll down a little bit more. Really what I want to talk about is overall attendance versus geographic attendance. So overall attendance is your attendance broken down into all of those different categories, and geographic attendance is where all of that came from. And those two numbers should be the same. So those should match up. Right under the overall attendance section, just above there, there's a spot for to enter in how many people were served virtually. So from your overall attendance, so everything that you did, how many people were served virtually. So this should not be the same number as your overall attendance. It should just be a portion of it. So if you serve 50,000 people and 1,000 were served virtually, overall attendance would be 50, and then 1,000 in this line. It seems to trip people up every so often, so we like to point that one out. The required attachments for the certification section, just below. Sorry, I can't get my thing off there. So we do have some required attachments here. The one I want to talk about is the school list. The school list must be submitted in Excel, and that's so that we can sort the list in, be able to edit it as we need to get the information that we need from it. So if you submit a PDF, that's not going to be accepted, and we'll send it back to you to have that just in the Excel version. At a minimum, this list must include the name of the school and the county in which it is located. And please, only unique schools. We don't need duplicates of school names. And also, please don't include any daycares, community centers, 4-H or Boys or Girl Scouts or other youth serving organizations. In this section, or in this attachment, we're specifically looking for schools. It can be home schools, private schools, but we just want a list of schools. So that was basically all that I have to go over on the qualification and certification. So yeah, it looks like we do have a couple questions. So I assume the attendance also needs to match the forms B and C. So yes, this will match. The overall attendance should match the total of all of the attendance on Form B and Form C. So both qualifying and non-qualifying. So whatever
Actually,
those. Oh, sorry.
Tim, can I interrupt you real quick? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, the numbers you're putting into Flux may or may not match
Oh, I'm
forms
sorry.
B
Yeah.
and C. The reason for this is we are collecting numbers for two separate reasons. So your B and C is to get to your qualifying numbers for your funding amounts, right? In that, we are allowing organizations to count as much as possible. And a really good example is classes. So on your forms B and C, an individual who comes to a 6-week class once a week would count as 6 attendance counts. So it's every time they come, they count. On this form that we just went over, we're actually trying to get to the number of people you serve, not the occurrences. So in that example, that person who came 6 weeks once a week would only count as 1 attendance number. The reason for this is forms B and C are to figure out statutorily how much money every single tier 2 is to receive. The numbers we're collecting on this form in the online system is a data collection tool that is part of figuring out the economic impact the arts and culture sector have in the Denver metro area, and we work with CBCA every other year on their economic activity study for the arts that comes out. Because of how economics, the economists want numbers, they want to know how many people, not how many times they came. So that's why there's a difference in the methodology. We do apologize for asking for the same information in two different ways. Unfortunately, it's because it's being used in two different ways. So your totals on Form B and C may or may not match your totals that you input into this form, depending on your programming.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm a little rusty.
No
with-
worries.
With my attendance.
We're still working through tier 3. The program
That's right.
offices are knee deep in tier 3 right now, and the rules are different for every tier. So
Right. And yeah, your total, and the next question is that Colorado or total? Yes, and we want all of your attendance, whether it's outside of the district or outside of the state. So that one, and let's see. Going back to attendance, can we get a copy of the sample supporting schedules for Form B and C? Those are going to be at the very end of the application directions. We have sample auditor letters, there are sample schedules, and also the sample agreed upon procedures form. So if you just scroll all the way to the end of the application directions, you can find those.
Actually,
and-
Tim, to kind of chime in just real quick, and I apologize, I was actually looking that up as the question was being asked, and we do not necessarily have the schedules.
Oh, we don't have the
for Form
schedules.
B and C, so I would say if anyone needs it, to reach out to their project, what do we call it? Project officer?
Pro-
What are
Program
we?
officer.
Thank you. I don't know what's wrong with me today.
Okay, so
we can
yeah,
help
we
them.
can,
Yeah.
we'll definitely, we can send you a copy of those if you'd like. And now we have a question about stories of interest, the stories of interest attachment. Dana, would you like to answer that one?
I can. So, again, we're interested in the fun and interesting things that you're doing with your organization. So stories of interest are just those heartfelt stories that crop up anytime during the fiscal year, just to give us an idea of your programming and how it's going. So it could be anything from daycares that visit your facility and they had a wonderful time, down to anything that may need a press release. So it's really, it's what you feel as an organization would be a story of interest. We'd like to hear that. And we share that with the board as well.
Any other questions on the qualification or certification sections? All right, I don't see anything, so we will just move right along. For just the next section, I just want to talk about the board presentations that a representative of your organization will do. Last year, we decided that to allow for more robust presentations, we will only have a third of the Tier 2 organizations report to the board each year. So those presentations will be at the August board meeting, which is the 22nd at 1 p.m. We haven't determined the location yet, but we'll let you know just as soon as we've got that solidified. Organizations will be selected by SCFD staff based on location and statutory discipline, just so we kind of get a good mix of our Tier 2s. We will send out the list of organizations and details on the presentations in the May Tier 2 update. And we do encourage that all of our Tier 2s attend that meeting to support their colleagues. It's not mandatory, but we'd love to see you all there. So again, just a couple deadlines to remember. The annual submission deadline is Wednesday, June 12th at 4 p.m. And again, the board meeting is Thursday, August 22nd at 1 p.m. And just one more reminder, incomplete or late applications will not be accepted. Please try to complete your submissions early so staff has time to review those and let you know if there's anything else that we need. Are there any other questions on any of the sections that we've gone over today?
Tim, could you just very briefly mention to our tier 2 organizations about the audit and how important the audit is to a completed audit is to the submission?
Yes, we have to have a completed audit. That is required. If your audit is complete, but your board has not yet voted on it, we will accept that. We understand timing of board meetings and things. So if you have your final draft and there will be no other changes made to it, it's just waiting on a board vote, then that is an acceptable document. If your audit will not be completed, we will take your most recently completed audit with your internals for the most recently completed fiscal year. And yes, we have a question about a copy of the training. So we will post the recording of this training on the Tier 2 website, and that should be up in the next couple of days. Any other questions? I am not seeing any. If you do have other questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to myself or Dana or Christine. We are here to answer any questions you might have. But if there's nothing else today, we will give you back about an hour of your time. Aha, there is one more question. Is there an anticipated date for releasing the 2025 threshold?
Yes. Be on the lookout from an email from myself or one of the program officers. We are currently calculating that, making sure that everything's correct, and we should be releasing the 2025 application year threshold for fiscal year and 2024 in the next week or so. So by the end of the month, you should see that number coming out so you can start planning for next year.
Great, thanks, Jessica. All right, anything else? All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So thank you all so much for attending today. We appreciate all that you do, for the community. And again, reach out to any of us with any additional questions that come up. Bye.